So where in the world are Metroid Prime 2 and 3 now that we've actually gotten a detailed first look trailer and launch year for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond? Because many, including myself, when that showed up at the Nintendo Direct, were obviously extremely hyped to finally see it, but also surprised that Nintendo didn't mention Prime 2 or 3 anywhere around that trailer being at the showcase. So it was a little bit surprising, and definitely some people are in the mindset now that Prime 2 and 3 are just going to get skipped and we will not see them release on the Nintendo Switch in the launch lead up to Prime 4 in 2025. And while you can never say anything for certain with Nintendo until they officially reveal it, the outstanding rumor mill conversation for Metroid Prime Remastered games has been for a very long time from the source that did get Metroid Prime Remastered right. Jeff Grubb bet his hair and beard on the line around when they would release that from Nintendo, and of course he was off on the timing but not on the project at all, because Metroid Prime 1 Remastered is now playable and in our hands. But the outstanding rumor is that Nintendo would give a more detailed treatment to Prime 1 Remastered, where it has all the new textures, lightings, visuals, quality of life improvements, and that Prime 2 and 3 would get something of a simpler remaster. And I have always pictured those games to maybe be more akin to Pikmin 1 and 2, where they very much look like their GameCube originals, but they're just a higher HD resolution, and you definitely will probably throw in those quality of life control enhancements where you can play it like a modern first-person shooter or go to motion controls. Basically the whole suite of control options that they included in the Switch version of Prime 1 Remastered is what I would expect Prime 2 and 3 to ultimately have. But the question is now becoming, because we saw Prime 4 Beyond at the most recent Direct and Nintendo didn't mention these games, is that it for them? Is there a world where Nintendo just skips these over? And that's what I want to deep dive today and talk about how we might see Nintendo finally confirm and ultimately release these games. So before we get on the same page with all of that, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick it off with discussing this idea about whether or not we had to learn about Prime 2 and 3 ahead of the Prime 4 reveal. And that's where I don't think that these are tied together in any way, shape, or form, and they don't need to be. Nintendo can just casually drop new gameplay well in advance of when Prime 4 is ultimately ready to release, because remember, we did not get an actual launch window for this game in 2025. We just know that the launch year will be 2025, and that's providing it doesn't get delayed, because clearly games like Tears of the Kingdom, we did see Nintendo commit to, or at least tease, a 2022 launch, and we then learned that Nintendo was, while almost completely done with the game, basically spent an entire extra year just polishing the game to make sure it was up to standards, because Nintendo does not like to release broken stuff. And thank you very much for that, Nintendo, because it is a poor practice to release a broken game now and patch it later, and we don't normally see Nintendo do that. So there is a world where 2025 doesn't have to be the launch year for Prime 4, but considering how long it's been, and you have to keep in mind it's really more like 5+ years of development, not the full 7, because it did get rebooted in 2019 and it probably got scrapped more or less as far as what work was being done on it. They gave it back to Retro Studios, and Retro is making what exactly looks like a sequel in the Prime franchise. It doesn't look any different than you would expect it to. It just looks like another more exciting, fast-paced, super story-heavy Prime 4 installment. And while it would have obviously been very nice to see Nintendo mention Prime 2 and 3 ahead of that reveal trailer, it is also not necessarily the right time for them to do so. And making the Pikmin comparison once again, and to go back to the Pikmin comparison one more time, not in the visual department, but rather in the release strategy, well, you might remember that in the lead up to Pikmin 4, we only had Pikmin 3 playable on the Nintendo Switch, and in fact, Pikmin 4 was getting ready to drop in July, and in the June Nintendo Direct before that, Nintendo promoted Pikmin 4, but they also shadow drop announced Pikmin 1 and 2. They released it that day digitally and released a physical version that would come out later on, but they did give the Pikmin fans the 1 through 4 all playable on the Nintendo Switch, albeit a little bit last minute in the lead up to the Pikmin 4 release. Now, I don't think Nintendo will wait so last minute for the Prime 1, 2, and 3 games to come over before Prime 4, but it is very likely that we will see Prime 4 again, kind of trickled out with an update, a new, more in-depth trailer at the next Nintendo Direct. I really do think that Nintendo will kind of tease this more or less like a Legend of Zelda game, where we see reoccurring new trailers, new looks spread out across different directs at different time points. And I do think there's a world where, let's say at a February Nintendo Direct next year, because that's actually when I'm personally predicting the next Direct to take place. We normally get one in September, but with the amount of late 2024 games that we did see Nintendo focus on, and even some 2025 ones at their most recent June Direct, it feels to me like they're probably not holding a fall time Direct. And I do think that lines up with where they're at with their whole transition to new hardware that we know that will be coming up. At least we're going to be learning about their next gen hardware within this fiscal year, which ends March 2025. So at the latest, they're mentioning it by March next year, but realistically, they're probably promoting it this fall, and then we're going to see it launch potentially around that March time window. And that would mean that a February Nintendo Direct could indeed be a packed presentation to really learn about a lot of new games, and it might be the perfect time frame to mention Prime 2 and 3 remastered dropping as a shadow drop. And I do think they will do both at once. In fact, that seems more or less confirmed now if we see them at all, because they're not going to release them like 6 months apart in the year that Prime 4 is coming out, because you're not going to drop Prime 2, then wait a while, drop Prime 3, and then that's going to be launching right around the same time as Prime 4. More than likely, we will get another story trailer for Prime 4 Beyond. And then, by the way, Metroid fans, here's your opportunity to play Prime 2 and 3 to get caught up on all of the lore and the series leading into Prime 4, because as mentioned with the Pikmin thing, you don't have to do numbered games and have all of them playable on the system, but I do think with the kind of story importance of a game like Metroid Prime, Nintendo's going to give us all of the numbered entries in the series up to that point in time. We even saw them release Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Wii. They've bundled these games together before. I think Prime 1 got a more in-depth remaster, more than likely, just because it was the bigger seller. It put the series in that 3D world for the first time, and it was definitely the more renowned, critically acclaimed one that people talk about. So Nintendo gave us that standalone to kind of start the marketing for Prime 4. And I think that a shadow drop announcement of 2 and 3 being bundled together at likely a $60 price point, and they look visually similar to what their original GameCube counterparts were, but they are up-res to HD with some more quality of life enhancements and modernized controls. I think that that's how we ultimately see Nintendo bring these games over, and I think a February Direct absolutely makes the most sense for them, considering that we don't know when Prime 4 Beyond will be released in 2025, but we would logically expect these games to be yet another puzzle piece for Nintendo to move some marketing levers to get people talking about the Prime games again. And I do think that they're going to ultimately give us these. And the frustrating thing is that we didn't get them at this June time presentation, so we do have to wait that much longer, but they probably want to release these a little bit closer to the final launch time for Prime 4, which we are expecting to take place in 2025. And on the topic of conversation of whether or not Prime 4 Beyond will be an early 2025 game or a late 2025 game, that is anybody's guess, but I could definitely see it being more of a middle of the year, if not a fall or holiday season 2025 release. And I do think we will indeed have the Switch 2 out by then, and I do think that we're going to see this be a cross-generational release title where there is a specific Switch 2 version that looks better visually and has ray tracing and DLSS enhancements and things like that, 4K docked resolution via upscaling, all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we know this is a Nintendo Switch game at the end of the day. In fact, that was confirmed to us once again at the most recent June Nintendo Direct. It says Nintendo Switch, coming to Nintendo Switch. There's some dialogue online about whether or not those graphics are possible on the Switch. Well, they are. Retro is just wizards with how they make graphics look on the Nintendo Switch, and I do think it's one of the best looking Switch games by far. I also don't think it's an impossible thing to see running on Switch hardware like some were putting headlines out there claiming. But sit tight, Metroid fans. Again, I'm pretty confident that Prime 2 and 3 will ultimately come. The same source, Jeff Grubb, Nate the Hate, the usual names kind of talking about these things, seem to have knowledge of the fact that Prime 2 and 3 are at least on the table to be brought over, and I do think we will see them ultimately do that before Prime 4 Beyond is released, and it will just be that big moment in the marketing hype lead up to it. So my eyes will be on the next Nintendo Direct for a potential reveal for Prime 2 and 3 remastered, but that's where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you think is the next time we will see a Metroid Prime update in a meaningful way? Do you think it's Prime 2 and 3 remastered shadow dropping at the next Nintendo Direct? Do you think that, yes, indeed, Nintendo will be holding a September Direct this year, and that's maybe when we will see them? Are you like me and you think more than likely it's going to be February next year? Or do you think that there's a shot that we don't get these games at all, and Nintendo will indeed just have Prime 1 remastered out there, skip 2 and 3, and ultimately drop 4 on the Nintendo Switch in 2025? So thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.